will be a lot of folks coming in and out of this meeting. And so we want to make sure that we set some ground rules to be sure to, for members to keep their camera on. And then for anybody else, you do not have to keep your camera on. But we do ask that you mute your microphone. And if you're not able to mic and sounds are made, Becca and I will probably try to mute sounds in the background. So just be aware that we may be working in the background on some things. So Natalie and Mary, we were trying to coordinate because they are our interpreters. So we want to be able to make sure that they can access members who need that. And so Mary and Natalie, we will use the chat along with Becca to make sure we can coordinate that. And then when Anita joins, we will get that all taken care of. But if you have questions, type that in the chat for us. And for users, if you need to ask a question or pop in, remember we do have the raise your hand feature and the chat feature that allows us to not interrupt our presenters. So I want to go ahead and welcome you to the meeting and turn it over to Melissa now. Thank you, Melissa. Can you hear us okay, Melissa? You may be on mute. I'm not sure. Make sure. Let's see. I see Melissa in the meeting.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right. No worries. Just wanted to make sure you were okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Little technical difficulty there. Thank you all for joining this afternoon. Joe, thank you for covering all the little housekeeping items there. So again, if you're just joining us, I think they've got everyone muted, so you can raise your hand or use the chat feature if you have a question. But do try to keep your video on, especially if you're a member, a council member, you really need to keep your video on and then keep your volume muted. So we'll just work through the agenda today. And if you need to take a break, definitely do that, or you can chat us, and if we need to take a break as a group, we can do that as well. Otherwise, we'll kind of work through the agenda and then take a break before our open forum. And right now, we'll kind of move on to taking the roll. So we'll ask that I'll call your name and unmute yourself and state your name and who you represent, a little bit about yourself, and we'll kind of move through the roll that way. So I'll start. I'm Melissa Knight, president of Farmers National Bank, and I'm on the council. I represent members meeting requirements of the IDEA. I have two children on the autism spectrum, and I work with Working the Puzzle for Autism as well. So next, Nita Dowd. Has Anita joined us yet? I don't see her on the list yet, so, okay. Julie Rubemeyer. Okay. Anna Light. I think I just saw Anna join.
Can you all hear me?
We can.
Okay, my name is Anna. I'm actually in a little bit of quarantine right now, so I'm at home with my kids. This is John David. He is a newbie, but I work at Broadhead Elementary as a 3rd and 4th grade special education teacher. I am on the council serving as a exceptional child teacher in the elementary setting, and I think that's it.
Thank you, Anna. Eric Umstead.
Hi, I'm Eric Umstead. I represent post-secondary institutions that prepare special education teachers.
Thank you, Eric. Next on the roll is Libby Settles, but I believe Libby had an employee that had to go home due to COVID, and she is teaching this afternoon, so she will not be joining us. Trisha Gibbons. Okay. Danny Hughes. I don't believe Danny was going to be able to join us either. Brandy Hitzelberger is usually our secretary, and she's unavailable this afternoon, so I don't think she's on the call either. And Kim Chevalier had a work conflict. Okay. Ravon, I see Ravon. Ravon Sims.
Yes, Ravon Sims. I'm the director of the Education Division for the Kentucky Department of Corrections, Adult Institutions. I represent adult corrections and also represent parents of children with exceptional needs.
Very good. Thank you, Ravon. Greta Hilton.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Greta Hilton, and I am the Associate Commissioner for the Office of Special Education and Early Learning at the Department of Education, and I am on the council to represent homeless youth and the financial component of the IDEA.
Thank you, Greta. Barry Lee.
Hi, I'm Barry Lee, Director in Casey County, but I represent vocational, community, and business organizations as an adjunct through Eastern Kentucky University and past chair. So good to see everyone.
Thank you, Barry. Is there anyone that I missed that joined us after I called your name?
I think Julie's on here, Melissa.
Julie Rubenmeyer?
Hi, Melissa. I'm sorry. Yes,
okay.
I joined a little bit late. Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. My name is Julie Rubenmeyer. I'm a parent representative.
Very good. Thank you. And did Anita join us? Not yet. Okay.
I don't think so, not yet, but we will continue to watch that to see when she joins. Thanks.
Okay. Joe, I do believe we've got 7 members though, is that right? So we do have a quorum.
I think so.
Okay.
And we actually have to approve minutes from the last 2 meetings, so I hope we have a quorum.
Yes. I believe 7 was the number that we needed. So since we do have that, we do have 2 sets of minutes that we need to look at. So we can start with the first, the older set, which is the August 20th, 2020. I'll accept a motion to approve those minutes unless there's any changes anyone would like to make.
I move to approve.
Eric, can I get a second?
I'll second. This is Ravon Sims.
Ravon, thank you. Okay, and Joe, can I just do all in favor, or do we have to do individual roll call on voting?
It needs to be individual.
Individual, okay.
Person, yeah.
All right. So Melissa Knight, I vote yes. Julie Rubenmeyer,
Yes.
thank you. Anna Light,
Yes.
Eric Umstead, I'm assuming you
Yes.
vote yes. Okay. Ravon Sims,
Yes.
Greta Hilton,
I will abstain just because of my role in the department as well as my role on the council.
understand. Barry Lee,
Yes.
did I get everyone? All right, that sounded unanimous, so those will be approved as is. We'll move on to the minutes for December we've got the minutes for April the 27th. And those were loaded to the portal as well. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, that's correct. All the information is in our Google Drive folder.
Okay.
And Melissa, I just wanted to say one other thing. You know that we are in a difficult situation since normally we have about 21 members. So actually, we wouldn't have a quorum. We have about 13 current members. So that's why I'm saying 7 is a quorum. But we just want to make sure we note that we don't have a full, panel of members. And so we can just kind of put that asterisk with that.
Right. 13 members, 7's okay. I'll make that note. I'm kind of taking notes as I go as well, since we don't have our secretary today. Okay. Has everyone reviewed the April 27, 2020 minutes? And does anyone have any changes they would like to make? Hearing none, could I get a motion to approve those as is?
Barry Lee, I'll make the motion to approve the minutes as presented for April 27th.
Thank you, Barry. First from Barry Lee. Can I get a second?
I'm Eric Umstead, and I second.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay.
And then we'll do a roll call vote again on approval. So Melissa Knight, yes. Julie Rubemeyer,
Yes, sorry for the delay.
that's okay. Anna Light,
Yes.
okay. Eric Umstead,
Yes.
yes. Okay. Ravon Sims,
Yes.
and Greta, I'll put you down as abstain on this as well.
Thank you.
And Barry Lee,
Yes.
yes. All right, and I'll make a note on that as well, that we've got the 13 official members right now, so the 7 there.
Thank you for doing that, Melissa. Yeah, I really appreciate everyone taking time to join and sticking with us. So we're just doing the best we can on that.
Yes. And later on, we'll talk about future meetings as well, but right now we'll kind of move on through the agenda. At this point, I will turn the meeting over to Ms. Hilton, our Associate Commissioner, for anything that she'd like to share with the group.
All right, thank you, and welcome. Hopefully soon we will get a full panel and we will receive all of those appointments and fill all of the vacancies. But in the meantime, let me say how much I appreciate your continued dedication to providing support for not only the department but also for students with disabilities, because that's the most important thing. So I want to take just a moment and share some overall updates from the Department of Education with you. And these are going to be broad, general updates that not only impact students with disabilities, but all students across the Commonwealth, as well as schools and districts. So probably the first big thing, since we convened last in August, we have gotten Dr. Jason Glass in his role as commissioner, who he has formally begun. On November 2nd, we were able to hire Dr. Thomas Woods Tucker, who joined KDE as its first ever Chief Equity Officer. He also leads the Office of Teaching and Learning, and it serves as the Deputy Commissioner for KDE. And there's also actually some new staff on the line from the Office of Special Education and Early Learning. And I believe we have Dr. Thomas Williams, who has also joined the office. And what's so important about Dr. Williams's role is he has an extensive background in preschool and early childhood. And so I'll give him just a moment to introduce himself. But that's one of the things, looking backward in some of the conversations that we'd had with this council, that was one of the areas where you guys had also expressed that there needs to be some heightened awareness around preschool and some things going on within preschool, because it wasn't a division within our office, although it's very, very important work. It's still within the division of IDEA implementation in preschool. So we have hired Dr. Williams to work at the office level as a policy advisor to inform not only special education policy, but preschool policy as well. So Dr. Williams, I'll give you just a minute to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Greta, and good afternoon, everyone. So as Greta mentioned, my name is Thomas Williams. I recently relocated from Oakland, California. I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, and I currently live in Louisville, Kentucky. Prior to this role, I've served as a early childhood teacher. I've served as an early childhood instructional coach, early childhood supervisor of lab schools, and also an early learning principal, which was my last role before joining the agency. So again, it's a pleasure to virtually meet you all, and I look forward to learning and contributing.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then later on, as we journey through the agenda today, you'll also be hearing from additional staff within OCL. And I won't spend time doing introductions because you know these folks. They'll be people that you're very familiar with. So I won't waste time going through that. A couple other things for you to be aware of: the Kentucky Board of Education recently convened and approved its budget and policy priorities for the next legislative session. And so these priorities include securing sufficient funding for general operations and maintenance of the Kentucky School for the Blind and Kentucky School for the Deaf, restoring funding for the initiatives in the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching, restoring school improvement funds and funding for instructional resources, and gaining additional funding for the SACEC Transportation Fund. During that December meeting, the board also heard updates and proposed changes around the state's accountability system, which is very detailed, extremely involved, and I'm probably not the best person to share all of those with you, so I'm going to hit the highlight. If you have further questions for this, Rhonda Sims is the Associate Commissioner for the Office of Assessment and Accountability, and I'm happy to connect you with Rhonda or any of her staff if you have additional questions. But just a quick summary of important topics would include Senate Bill 158, which was amended KRS 1586455, in case anybody just has a desire to read the statute. And I know everybody's dying to do that. Created an accountability system that includes an annual differentiation of all public schools in the state using multiple measures that describe each district's overall performance, school, and student demographic group. It also requires districts to be evaluated on status and change for state indicators, which include student assessment results, progress toward achieving English proficiency by English learners, quality of school climate and safety, and high school graduation rates and post-secondary readiness. There are 5 levels ranging from very high to very low, and 5 change levels ranging from increase significantly to decrease significantly. The KBE heard from KDE staff in Rhonda's office, who developed a 5x5 color-coded table that combined both status and change. Changes to the accountability system will appear before the board again for a second read and action at its regular meeting in February. So if you're interested in learning more about that, the first Wednesday in February will be that meeting in which they will be taking this back before the board for the second reading. The legislative session, which is just around the corner, actually convenes on January 5th, and the legislature will be charged with passing the state's next fiscal budget, which will be a 1-year budget this year, which is very unusual. It's the only time I know of this ever occurring because, as you will remember, last spring they were sent home early or chose to go home early because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and so they left with a 1-year budget. Obviously, additional legislation will be discussed during the course of this short session. Actually, Senate Bill 177 in the regular 2020 session set forth alternate provisions for local school districts to use when calculating average daily attendance. And this is probably one of the most important things to keep our eyes on right now. This is used in the SACEC fund determination for the 1920 school year. The provisions agreed upon and provided by SB 177 prevented the loss of substantial state funding traditionally based on ADA, which permitted districts to use a variety of instructional delivery models in response to COVID-19. The provisions of Senate Bill 177 applied only to the 1920 school year, so the KBE hopes to obtain legislative relief and apply the intended supports of 177 to the 20, 21, and 21-22 school years. And what's significant about this is obtaining this relief will allow the state's funding provisions to accommodate not only in-person, but virtual and hybrid instructional delivery models that has occurred through this COVID-19 emergency. Healthy at schools, obviously, as you know, since March, that's been what we have been focusing on as a high priority, is ensuring that, in the spring that schools were able to transition to a virtual learning model. And then in the summer, we began to work on how to get schools reopened. And the KDE, along with the Department for Public Health, released what we refer to as the flagship document, which is the Healthy at Schools guidance. So we've been, and as you know, as parents and community members, some schools have opened to in-person instruction, some have continued with virtual, some continued with hybrid models. But under executive order, the governor suspended all in-person instruction effective November 23rd. And under that order, elementary schools, which would be grades K through 5, were permitted to reopen for in-person instruction on December 7th. However, schools must continue to abide by the Healthy at Schools guidance and cannot be in a county that's in a red zone for community transition. Under the order, all middle school and high school grades, which would be considered grades 6 through 12, were directed to use the non-traditional instruction or NTI model until January 4th. And currently, the KDE is gathering feedback from the state's education community before submitting the recommendation to Governor Beshear, who will ultimately decide whether to suspend in-person instruction further or to let this executive order expire. And so we're very interested. I mean, if you have any feedback that you would like to share, very interested in hearing that. Actually, on December 4th, the governor met virtually with all of the superintendents of the state and discussed the plan for the vaccinations to be delivered to the state's education community. KDE is collaborating with DPH, obviously, to provide additional guidance to districts about vaccine distribution before winter break. So, as you know, that's, recently, even since this call, there's been some additional things come up around the vaccine. And hopefully, I think, isn't it today the 10th? I think it was the 10th that the FDA was expected to authorize the vaccine for emergency use. So we'll see what happens there and then move forward. But those are the big things, big hot topics that are occurring at KDE right now. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments, or if you have any input that you would like for me to share, further across KDE with regard to reopening, we're happy to have that discussion here as well. So I will turn it back over to you, Melissa, to take any questions or comments or move forward with the agenda.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that information. I know I have 5 at home that are learning from a distance, and it is very challenging. But the teachers are doing their very best, and at least 2 of mine that have special needs are kind of going in small groups to school a couple days a week to work with ESL teachers. So we have found that to be very helpful. So I don't know if anybody else had any comments or questions, but I've certainly seen the teachers working as hard as they've ever worked to try to make the school year as good as they can for the kids. So I appreciate that. Any other questions or comments?
Melissa, we just have one favor to ask before we proceed. Some users are having some bandwidth issues and things are blurry. And I know members are supposed to keep their camera on, but in this circumstance, it would be best if your camera is only turned on when you're speaking. So if you can if you can turn your video off until you speak, that would be great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so hopefully that'll help everybody. Okay, hearing no other questions, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the state performance plan, or the annual performance plan overview. And I have here that Sylvia Starkey is going to present that for us. Hi, Sylvia.
Hi, how are you guys? So annually, before we turn in the state performance plan and annual performance report, we always bring that information on the state's progress to the State Advisory Council for Exceptional Children. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'll be sharing with you all of the data. It will be pretty data heavy, so just giving you a heads up on that. And then, the guiding question we really want you to think about per indicator is there any feedback that the council would like to provide on any of those indicators regarding any kinds of questions they may have, or any kind of clarification we could provide you. Just give me just a second and I will present that. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes, we can see that, Sylvia.
Yeah, I can see
Just
that.
making sure. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so the first indicator that we're going to discuss is indicator 1, which is graduation rate. So when you think about graduation rate, we've put on here a calculation of how we get that information. And then on each of these slides, you'll see a graph about how that data has looked from over the past 6 years. And then back to 2014, what did our data say up until then? And what is our data from 2019? We submit February 1st of 2020, but just keep in mind that the data would be from 2019 there's a couple of exceptions to that, and we'll get to those when we get to those indicators. So if you look at graduation, graduation rates are calculated by the Office of Assessment and Accountability, and the goal here is to be above the target. So you want to have a higher grade, a higher rate than what the target was. And so if you look for 2019, our target was 79.6% graduation rate, and the state was able to reach a graduation rate of 75.5%. And so we did not meet the target. However, there was no slippage. And so if you're new to slippage, slippage basically is a fancy way to say, did you get worse than you were the year before by a defined percentage? Slippage typically in something like this is greater than 1%, right? So if you look, while we did not meet the target of 79.6%, we actually showed improvement in this indicator. The year before we were at 74.83%. So a little bit less than a percentage in growth, not in going backwards. So, for this one, while we did not meet the target, we did not have any slippage. And so I just wanted to know if there was any feedback on graduation before we move on to the next indicator. Nope. Okay. Our next one is indicator 2, which is the dropout rate for students with disabilities, and it's calculated using a special education exiting file. And in this case, the goal is to be below the target. And so when you look at that trend line, you would want to see it actually be underneath the target, where before on the slide before you wanted to see it be above that trend line. In this case, the target was 1.71%. We did not meet the target, and we did not meet slippage. You will see if you look at the 2018 data versus the 2019 data that we actually grew. Some of the data looks funny. In this one, you actually want to reduce your dropout rate, so it's good to have a lower number. And so while it looks like it got worse because on the slide before you wanted the numbers to grow, this time you want them to get lower. And so again, while we didn't meet the target, we still showed growth towards meeting that target. Any questions about indicator 2? Nope. Okay. And Joe, if there is any questions in the chat, do you mind to tell me what they are, just because I can't see the chat while I'm presenting? So
Yes,
if
I'll
anybody
do.
raises their hand, or if you could monitor that for me, that would be helpful.
Yep, users, you can put anything in the chat or raise your hand if you have any questions. I'll monitor it, Sylvia.
Okay, thank you. So if you notice, there's a skip between indicator 2 and indicator 3. Indicator 3 is assessment. And so we look at proficiency and participation rate as part of indicator 3. However, there was no assessment given during the 2019-20 school year because of COVID-19. So there is no data to report that year. And so that's why we don't have it in this presentation. OSEP is not requiring us to report it. Indicator 4A and 4B really talk about suspension and expulsion of students with disabilities greater than 10 days. So anytime a student with a disability is suspended or expelled, it is limited to out of school suspensions currently. And so this is actually one of those indicators that lags 2 years. And so most of them, when we talk about the year, we're talking about the year before. So in most of our indicators, we're talking about what happened during the 2019-20 school year. However, this one lags 2 years behind. And so you would see that the data is just a different school year than what you're typically looking at. And so in terms of indicator 4, your ratio has to be greater than 3.0 to be reviewed. So there's some districts that are excluded from the calculation due to their cell size. And if you remember, if you've been on this council for a long time, this is one of those indicators, and you'll see a big jump from 2015 to 2016 in the data. And there's a reason for that, because back in 2016, we changed how we did the calculation for indicators 4A and 4B. And so you'll see them rise, but that was intentional. So when we were looking at data previously, what we looked at was that we had realized that only certain districts were getting pulled. And so we changed the calculation to make sure that all districts were being reviewed in the same way. And when we did that, the number of districts who were identified increased. And so we saw a short-term increase in non-compliant districts. However, you can see that from 2018 to 2019, there was a fairly significant decrease in, we attribute that to some of the monitoring that we have been doing within the state to help people understand behavior and how to do manifestation determinations as well. Same thing in this one. We did not meet the target. However, there was no slippage that occurred. And again, there was about a 3% reduction across indicator 4A. 4B is the same as 4A, where 4A looks at all students. 4B actually disseminates them out by race and ethnicity categories. So there's 7, race and ethnicity categories, and we look at each one individually. And again, your ratio has to be greater than 3.0. The statewide rate is set at 0.2%. And so if you are 3 times greater than the state's rate, then you would be identified for a review. And then we go in and review your policies, procedures, and practices as a district to determine, was there anything in your policies and procedures and practices that was non-compliant that led to students of certain disability categories being suspended or expelled at a rate greater than their peers. And so again, you'll see the jump in 2000. You didn't see it in 2016 this time, but you see it happen in 2017, and then a reduction across time to be able to see those. So again, we didn't meet the target. The target for 4B, it's a compliance indicator, so it's mandated to be at 0%. So what that means is that we're looking for no instances of non-compliance in the state. And so it was at 4% last year, and we were able to get it to 2.29% this year. Any questions about indicators 4A or 4B before we move on? Nope. Okay. So indicator 5 has multiple sections as well. And so it talks about educational environments for students who are aged 6 to 21. In this case, the goal is to be above the target. And you can see that we met the target and there is no slippage. This is one of the indicators that we feel really good about as a state. You'll see that the target has been set at 71.8%, and we have been able to, meet that target across time. So that's exciting to see that we're able to continue and also grow the participation rate across time. For indicators for 5B, this one is students who are, I'm sorry, and let me go back. This was for students who were served inside of a regular classroom. 5A was greater than 80%. And this one is students who are served within a regular classroom less than 40% of the day. And so in this case, you want to be below the target. And so in this case also, we met the target, but there was no slippage. And so, we were able to meet the requirements there. For 5C, this is for students who are served in separate schools, residential facilities, or homebound or hospital placements. And again, you want to be below the target, and the state was able to meet the target and also not demonstrate any slippage as well. Any questions about indicator 5 before we move on? Indicator 6 talks about preschool environments, so it's really similar to indicator 5. And so in indicator 6A, it's students who are age 3 to 5 who were in a regular program and received the majority of their special ed and related services in that regular education program. Again, you want to be above the target. We met that target, and if you look at it across time, we've been continually meeting that target historically and able to increase their participation in the regular environment across time. For 6B, it's students with disabilities who are age 3 to 5 who are served in a separate special education class, a separate school, or a residential facility. And again, in this one, you want to be below the target. And so we did meet that target, and there was no slippage, and we were able to decrease it from 4.5% the year before to 3.89% this year. Any questions about 6B before we move on? Indicator 7 is broken into multiple factions, and so it's about preschool outcomes. And so you'll hear us talk about 7 in terms of A, B, and C, and then A, B, and C are broken down into 1 and 2. And so indicator 7A is about their social emotional outcomes. 7B really talks about early language and communication, and 7C talks about preschool outcomes in terms of appropriate behaviors. And in each one of those, it's broken into 1 and 2, just like we talked about. And so in the outcome, it's kids who substantially increase their rate of growth by the time they turn 6 years of age or exited the program. And 2 would be the percent of preschool children who were functioning within age expectations by the time they turned 6. So for indicator 7A1, which is social emotional skills, and so number of preschool children in the targeted category, we did not meet the target, and in this case, there was slippage present. So we are working towards finding the root cause of that slippage and addressing that within our APR. So anytime that there's slippage present, we as a state will do a root cause analysis to determine what do we think is the cause of those, and then what are we going to do about them. For 7A2, we were able to, you want to be above the target. This is also social emotional skills. And so we met the target and there was no slippage. For 7B1, early language and communication, we did not meet the target, but there was no slippage, but that doesn't look right because now that I'm looking at it, it says 68.5 and we were at 68.5. So I'm going to double check on that one. And double check to make sure, because if it was 68.5, then we did meet that target. So I apologize for that. 7B2, the goal is to meet the target without to be above the target, and we were able to meet this target as well with no slippage. For 7C1, appropriate behaviors, we met the target and did not have slippage, and 7C2 as well. We met the target and had no slippage. Any questions about indicator 7? And I will get that exact number to you. I can get it before the end of the meeting. It's in another notebook. Nope. So parental involvement is indicator 8. And so this one is really looking at the number of respondent parents who report favorably on the parental involvement in their children with their children's school. And so favorably means that the school facilitated parent involvement as a means of improving services and results for students with disabilities. In this case, you want to be above the target. we met target and there was no slippage, and we actually increased it pretty significantly across 1 year. So that's pretty exciting to see. Any questions about indicator 8?
Sylvia, how do they measure parent involvement there? Is that through the surveys that they send
through the
out?
survey that they send.
Okay.
There's a question on that parent survey that they use to report indicator 8.
Okay.
Good question. Anybody else? Okay. Indicator 9 talks about disproportionate representation. And so disproportionate representation is whether or not, how many districts had disproportionate representation of ethnic groups that was a result of inappropriate identification practices. This is one of those compliance indicators that asks for 0%, no instances of noncompliance. And so when we look at this indicator, we actually do a file review in each district to determine whether there were any practices that were happening that inappropriately identified students in particular ethnic groups. And in this case, you want to be above the target. And so we were 0% and no slippage. So we actually, were able to meet it exactly. There was no instances of noncompliance, which is exciting. For indicator 10, you also have to have 0%, but it looks like at it through specific racial categories and specific disability categories. The difference between 9 and 10 is that 9 really looks at your special education population as a whole. So were students who were Hispanic more likely to be identified as a student with a disability, where indicator 10 is were students who were Hispanic more likely to be identified in a specific disability category, like let's say a specific learning disability. So did I not necessarily put them as a whole overrepresented, but maybe they're represented within a specific population? Again, that target is set at 0%, but there was 5.25% of non-compliance districts. And so we did not meet that target, and there was slippage present for indicator 10. And so again, this is one of those situations where we would target the root cause of the non-compliance and ask districts to conduct, corrective action plans, and then we would report to OSEP basically what we're going to do about it. Any questions about indicator 10? Nope. Okay. Indicator 11 is about child find. And so students, it really looks at students whose evaluations were conducted and completed within 60 school days. And so you want to be at 100%. The goal has to be 100% here. And we use a sampling of districts. So we do file reviews to determine those. And if you look across this, you'll see a significant decrease in 2019. Right now, we are attributing that to COVID. There was almost every district that was identified this year as non-compliant. There was some sort of impact due to COVID. Lots of concerns about meeting 60-day timelines for districts who are not able to get parents into to bring their child in for evaluation because of their concerns with COVID. Maybe they have comorbidities or whatever else. And so, yes, there was slippage, and we think a large percentage of that is really due to COVID-19. Any questions about indicator 11? Indicator 12 talks about early childhood transition. And so in this one, the target has to be 100%. And again, we use sampling in this. It talks about students who were referred prior to age 3. And again, this is another one of those situations where in this case, you'll see a large drop by about 10%. And there is also a COVID-19 impact on this indicator as well. It's very similar to indicator 11. However, it's the preschool version. And so we know that there was a COVID-19 impact on this indicator as well. Indicator 13 talks about secondary transition. And so it's talking about youth age 16 and above with IEPs that contain all of the requirements for secondary transition. The target has to be 100% in this case. Again, we use sampling to do this, and we did not meet the target, but there was no slippage. So the year before we were at 93%. So while we didn't meet the target, we actually grew and got better than we were the year before, which is what we're looking for. Any questions about indicators 11, 12, or 13 before we move on?
I mean, I would just ask, I mean, that's got to get even worse, right? This year when there's potential to go through almost an entire school year not being in person. How are schools handling, identification when the teachers really aren't in front of the students in person?
For evaluations?
For evaluations, yeah. I just
There's lots of different ways that districts have been able to do that. And so any districts that is struggling, we have asked them to kind of reach out to us and let us help them problem solve their situation. And in most cases, when they do that, we've been able to help them problem solve and think outside of the box. But I would anticipate that next year could potentially continue to have a large COVID-19 impact as well. Any other questions? Indicator 14 talks about post-school outcomes. And so some people refer to this as the yo-yo survey, youth 1 year out survey, from parents that parents get when their students have graduated. The goal here is to be above the target. And again, you'll see that we did not meet the target of 25.5%. However, we did increase from the previous year. So there was no slippage in this case. Indicator 14B also talks about post-school outcomes. And in this case, we did not meet the target, but there was slippage present. And so again, just like every time that slippage is present, we'll identify that root cause, figure out what's going on, and talk about those things. Indicator 14, again, did not meet the target, and there was slippage present. And you'll see a large jump in the trend data line where it was pretty stagnant and then it goes pretty high up. This was one of those indicators last year where we had met the target and the data was significantly higher than the target. And so OSEP, remember, if you were here last year, we had to reset targets with you guys. And so we were required to change the target on that one because the data was higher than what the target was. And so in this case, you'll see a jump in that target. Had it been the same that it was last year, we would have met the target again. So that's kind of where that came into play. Indicator 15 talks about resolution sessions. Resolution sessions happen as part of dispute resolution, particularly due process hearings. So before when you enter into a due process hearing with a district as a parent, they ask you to participate in a resolution session to see if you are able to settle it kind of before going through a fully adjudicated session, hearing. And so this one really looks about how successful were those resolution sessions. And so it really looks about like how many of them resulted in an agreement. In this case, you want 70 to 80% of your resolution sessions to come to an agreement. In this case, we didn't meet that target, but there was no slippage because there was growth from the previous year. I think we've kind of found that people are a little bit less likely to agree over the last couple of years than maybe there was before. And so, we look at those individual resolution sessions to see, was there any themes that we can grow on as a state to determine, is there anything we can do differently? Indicator 16 is similar to indicator 15, but it talks about, instead of due process, it discusses mediation. And so again, you want your mediation range to be pretty high, because the best case solution is when you guys can agree on something and we don't have to put that. That's what's best for kids. And so in this indicator, it falls within a range. You want them to range anywhere between 61% to 85%. And so this year we were able to do 75% agreements, which met the target. and there was no slippage present. So at this point, we've kind of talked about all of the indicators. If you have any questions about the SPPAPR as a whole, I'd be happy to discuss any questions that you have or information that you'd like for us to share with you about the process. So I'll kind of just open it up for any feedback at this point.
Sylvia, I want to thank you for presenting all that information. That's a lot of data. And so what I can do is you can send me the presentation and I will upload it to our Google folder.
Perfect.
And that way it gives members a little bit of time to go over that and review that. But if there are specific areas or issues that members want to point out or ask questions about, please let Sylvia know.
And if you think of them later, I'll be happy to, address those with you individually as well. Okay, Melissa, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. It is a lot of information, but it's very good to see where we're making progress and where we still have a little bit of work to do. Actually, I think the next item on the agenda is yours as well. So we'll be having a due process update from you.
Sure. So when we reviewed the due process from your meeting back in August, there actually have not been any new due process hearings since the last time that you met that have gone live. So during this point, what we wanted to do was just ask you if there's any feedback on what you've seen so far as a whole, or any way that you would like to see information that maybe we haven't presented it to you in the past that we could, improve upon, or that you'd like to see it maybe in a different way. So if you have any feedback about that, I'm happy to take it.
Very good. Do any of the council members have any questions? I know in the past we've had questions about where to find that information on the website in general, but
I can show that again if you think it would be helpful.
It might be a good idea just to refresh our memories, but because I think sometimes that's the most difficult thing.
Okay, hang on just a second. Let me share my screen. Oh, it's not letting me to share. Hang on. Okay, so when you go to I'm gonna do this. When you go to the KDE webpage, mine goes straight to, oh, here we go. When you go to the KDE webpage, there's lots of different ways to get there, but the fastest way is to type dispute resolution into the search box. And it will show up as the very first search engine. And so you click on that one. And when you open this page up, to the right-hand side, you'll see all of them listed. Any of them that say ECAB next to them, that's the Exceptional Children's Appeal Board. And so those are the ones that have been through the appeal process and have done them. And when you open them, you can click on them and it will open the hearing for you to discuss. And then, Joe, I believe you send those out to them as they post as well, correct?
Yes, that's correct. As Todd sends them to us, then we send them out to the members.
So you'll also get a copy of them in your inbox as well.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have any questions for Sylvia? Comments? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Melissa.
All right, the next item on our agenda is, so we just got done reviewing the state performance plan, or the annual performance plan, and now we're going to take a look at the state systemic improvement plan with Andrea Craig, the state transformation specialist. Is Andrea? There she is. Hello.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm sorry if you hear my dogs barking in the background. I apologize in advance. Hopefully everyone's doing well this afternoon. I will go ahead and share my screen quickly. Let me know if this does not pop up or if there's any issues with it. Might take a second.
Okay, I can see it.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Melissa. So as Melissa stated, I'm going to go through our State Systemic Improvement Plan, or our SIP. We are in phase 3, year 4 of the SIP, or the State Systemic Improvement Plan. So I'm here to just give you guys a kind of an overview and an update in regards to that. So this is tied to the U.S. Department of Education. The Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEPs, has developed the accountability framework called the Results Driven Accountability, or RDA. And the RDA seeks to balance the educational results and functional outcomes for students with disabilities with compliance measures of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or the IDEA. And this includes that State Systemic Improvement Plan, which is a comprehensive multi-year plan, which is part of our annual performance review. I do want to note that the SIP, while all of the other indicators are reported on February 1st, we report on April 1st. So as I stated, we are in phase 3, year 4. So we are at the end of this chart that you see on your screen. So in phase 1, we went through the analysis of our infrastructure to identify the strengths and then leveraging the weaknesses to address areas in the future. Through phase 2, it was about the development of that infrastructure to support the implementation of effective evidence-based practices. And then through phase 3, year 4, which we are in now, which was submitted in April of 2020, that gave us an overview to report to OSEP on our progress on the SIP. And we are currently moving into phase 3, year 5, which will be submitted in April 2021. So in our data from phase 1, we looked at that analysis of the data, determined that math was the area that we needed to focus on because there was a performance gap, with 62% of educators identifying a need for training on how to close that gap in achievement, and then 57% of those educators identifying the need of training for differentiation in instruction. And as we have moved into phase 3, year 4, we sought stakeholder input on our SIMR, or our State Identified Measurable Result Targets, through the beginning of the year trainings with directors of special education across the state. And through that input, we noted that the challenging behaviors are increasing, leading students with disabilities being removed from the classroom. And this results in that missed instructional time, which is so important, thus making it difficult for students with disabilities to succeed academically. So taking that feedback, we did, as a result, the state identified measurable results was adjusted slightly to add that PBIS based on that reflection and the feedback from the stakeholders. So we are still focused on increasing math in middle school mathematics, and reducing those novice performance, and implementing and scaling sustainability practices in PBIS, or positive behavior interventions and supports, while also providing support and scaling and sustainability in the evidence-based practices in math. We also have a partnership that we've established through this through the SIP that we've had ongoing, that is continuing through our Technical Assistance Center nationally to support the education systems in creating implementation capacity for the evidence-based practices that benefit all students. And this center uses implementation science to deliver those practices and successfully implement systemic change in a systemic manner. And this is done through active implementation science, as I noted. So we identify that usable innovation, or what works, and then multiply it by that effective implementation, so how it works, through the enabling context with who or where and with whom it works, to improve those student outcomes. If one of these is missing, then our student outcomes will not be improved. But if we have all of these variables in place, we have noted that student outcomes will improve. So in Kentucky, we work in what we call transformation zones. And this is a vertical slice that is small enough to be manageable, yet large enough to be representative of the whole. Currently, we have 3 cohorts that you see in the different shades on the map that is represented on your screen. Those cohorts consist of 6 of the 9 special education regional cooperatives in our state. And due to COVID, our supports have shifted into that virtual format this past year. We continue to push on the competency fidelity through our Kentucky Data Dashboard. The core components of that is the usable innovation is designed is used to design that training and coaching through those PDSA cycles to support teacher practice, which will in turn support the improved student outcomes. I do want to note we have, based on our feedback from our TZ partners, we have adapted our Kentucky Data Dashboard for our partners to be an automated system so that it can meet their needs in real time. So as we move forward with our SIP, the proposed targets for Indicator 17 mirror the process that were used by KDE for the 2018 through 2023 KDE strategic plan and the February 2020 Commonwealth of Kentucky revised ESSA, or Every Student Succeeds state plan. As you can see here, we have our baseline targets that are set, which includes our actual target for the 2018-2019 school year, which we are using as a baseline. And then you have our projected targets out for the next 5 years listed. And in these targets, I would want to note that these are in draft form and that we would like feedback from the council in regards to these targets as well. Does anyone have any questions or any feedback that they would like to provide at this time? All right, seeing.
And Andrea, I would just add that you can send me the presentation and we will load it in the Google folder, just like we did for the SPP APR. And as users have questions, we'll be glad to address those. So appreciate you sharing this information, Andrea.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. And I do want to note that we are planning to continue to replicate this process to additional transformation zones within the cohorts that we have currently, as well as scaling to the additional 3 cooperatives throughout our state. And if you guys ever have any questions, feel free to contact me. And Joe, I will send you this PowerPoint here in just a little while so you can add that to the drive.
Yeah, thank you so much. We do have a question here. How will they measure without state testing this past year? How's that going to work without assessment data?
Right, that's a really great question. I know that there's lots of things that we're still trying to figure out because that state assessment has been one of the biggest impact points for our data on this. So we're trying to gather other data points to also report on in lieu of that.
Very good. Thank you, Andrea.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
And Melissa, I just wanted to remind folks that typically at our November meeting, we have an orientation for members so that we revisit our purpose on the council, and then we revisit an overview of our SPP APR and our SIP to really look at the data, and then we have a discussion about what areas of unmet need or what gaps exist so that we prioritize for our topics for the next year. And so we haven't been able to do that, but we wanted to present the data to you just so that you are thinking about areas we might need to focus on.
Very good point, Joe. And hopefully maybe cross our fingers in February, we might be able to get together in person and get some of those items on the agenda, perhaps.
Yeah,
okay.
let's hope so. And I hope they have the ARC of Kentucky conference, which we normally coordinate with in February. But if they do not, we will continue to meet virtually.
Okay. All right, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the cooperative update. And I believe joining us, we have Stephanie Little, the director of the Kentucky Educational Development Corporation. Stephanie, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We also have Brandy Bray with us, the director of Southeast South Central Cooperative.
Great, thank you, Brandy.
All right, I'm going to share my screen with you. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So today we're going to talk about what has been going on with our special education cooperatives, the activities that we've been doing since the pandemic has caused us to modify our activities. And the content of this presentation is actually from all 9 of our cooperative directors. You're going to hear from Brandy and myself today, but the other 7 had input into the presentation. And these are the logos for all of our special education cooperatives. And I hope you all see those quite often. And as I said, we have 9 special ed cooperatives across the state. I think you all are familiar with those. But you can see that each cooperative is shaded in a different color. And I'll give you just a couple of seconds to locate your cooperative. And you go by the county which you live in. And if you're not able to locate your region or your cooperative, just reach out to any of us and we will help you. We'll get you connected. We're a very close-knit bunch and we work together very well. So what have we been doing? In response to the COVID, our districts and our staff have had to shift to more virtual instruction. And right now, most of ours are total virtual instruction. And we call that, of course, the non-traditional instruction. And during these times, the cooperatives, we've shifted our work. We've modified some of the way that we do things, and we are continuing to provide virtual professional learning opportunities. We did that prior to COVID, but we've really had to pretty much change and make most of the things we're doing right now virtual. We have self-paced learning modules. Each cooperative has a set, developed different modules, and we have a set on our websites, but we also have one repository that we keep everything in, and Brandy's going to talk to you a little bit about that later. We are also continuing book studies with our teachers and our principals and all of our administrators. And we are doing some virtual PLCs and virtual coaching. We are actually, when we are able to go into those virtual settings, we can do coaching, we can do behavioral observations, just different things. It's amazing some of the things that we are able to continue that we at first thought, oh my goodness, how are we ever going to do this? We are learning a lot. We are learning as the teachers are, and we are really going into those virtual sessions, and we are able to observe students, we are able to observe teachers, and to give them lots of feedback. And as I said, our training continues. We're doing those synchronous trainings as we always did. We were in person. Our trainings were tailored to a district, or we were doing one-on-one coaching with teachers or PLCs or small group trainings. We are continuing all of those virtually. And then we also have some asynchronous trainings going on, and those are our modules and all of our book studies, different things like that. And when we are doing those real-time trainings, we are trying to record those so that we'll allow for more flexibility with the teachers, because we aren't able really to get in there sometimes during their workday. We realize that teachers are strapped. They are trying to get all their meet with all their students during the day, and we are trying to give as much flexibility with them so that they can continue to get their training. Now, one of the projects that we are very proud of is in collaboration with the Office of Special Ed and Early Learning. When the pandemic first hit, we all got together, all the special ed co-op directors and the Department of Education, the OSIL staff, and we try to think of what could we do right now that we can get to the teachers, what kind of professional learning, what kind of help can we get to them so that they can go ahead and do what they need to be doing for our students with disabilities in this virtual environment and in the shift between being in person online. So we came up with topics. We prioritized what do they need. And these were our topics at that time, back in the spring: specially designed instruction, progress monitoring, accommodations and modifications, specially designed instruction for moderate and severely disabled students, supporting behavior, and utilizing principles of a universal design for learning. So those were our first set of webcasts. And the webcasts were 30 minutes long, and it was in real time. And we had everyone would join. We would give a time for evaluation, and question and answering was actually virtual. We didn't have that in the question and answer sessions in real time, but if anyone had a question, they submitted it and we were able to get right back to them. So in the fall, we switched our way of doing things, and we started doing the sessions so that they're not actually in real time, but we recorded them and posted them on KDE's website and the Kentucky Dose Support website, which Brandy's going to talk to you about. And this allows the teachers to go on and look at these videos anytime they want. Well, in the fall, when we were talking about the topics, some of the same topics were coming up. So we decided to be a little more narrow in the focus and to kind of drill down into some of those topics that we had in the spring. So we started out with co-teachers could do anything virtually, even station teaching. And if you all haven't watched this video, this is wonderful. All of these are wonderful, but this one is one of my favorites. And we have handouts that go with each of them. But we started with that one, and then we went on to progress monitoring in a virtual setting. And as I said, we did some progress monitoring in the spring, but we got a little more specific in this video. And then using self-monitoring to support student behavior in any setting. And then we did leveraging math tasks to impact learning, and then strengthening vocabulary routine. And again, these are just very short 30-minute videos, and they offer lots of resources. And the participants are able to go back and watch these anytime that they want. They can watch the spring and the fall webcasts. So now I will turn it over to Brandy, and she can tell you a little bit more about how to access the webcasts.
Okay, Kentucky Dose Support website. It houses a wealth of information for directors of special education as well as others who work in the field. This site is where you can go and access those trainings and self-paced modules that have been created by cooperatives and our state task groups, and they're all linked to this page. This is one of the good things that have came out of the pandemic situation, is having a wealth of training opportunities that are accessible to anyone. So if you just click on the link, you can go through and look at topics and choose a training that meets your needs. Another product of the cooperatives is a tool for addressing those compliance indicators that Sylvia spoke about earlier. This resource can provide a description of each indicator, its data source, and links to tools to assess in addressing those indicators. Now, this is something that is still in the process of being worked on, so that will be shared out very soon. The State Cooperative Literacy Task Group has collaborated to create coaching tools to address the areas of reading and writing. These tools identify and address common problem areas in each of the subjects, and provide examples of specially designed instruction and methods for monitoring progress in each of those areas. This is really nice because each of those areas is linked to research-based strategies that can address some of the common problems in reading and writing. The State Cooperative Assistive Technology Task Group has collaborated to identify some tools that can be used to increase accessibility when using various virtual platforms. So if you click on this link, it will ask you to make a copy of a Google document, but it tells you ways that you can meet the needs of students with varying disabilities. So for example, a student who's visually impaired, there are some some options for Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, or Zoom. And there are links to information on those particular accessibility features. So this is really nice and can be used by anyone, not just in the classroom setting.
Are you all able to see that on my screen?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, so you can see there are lots of different areas that have been broken down into things that could be used for each of those platforms. Okay. Of course, our cooperatives continue to provide trainings related to due process through both the virtual and asynchronous platforms. We are meeting synchronously or Zoom trainings where teachers can log in and we can present the trainings that way. Also, there are asynchronous modules related to many due process areas. And of course, we have self-paced modules as well. But the work still continues. Okay, that concludes our update from the state cooperatives. Do you have any questions that Stephanie or I could answer for you?
I just want to say real quick, and I've shared some information with Dr. Bray in the Southeast South Central, and also give some recommendations out to Ms. Karsner and also the other co-op directors. As a director of special education, I have probably had more training for my staff this year than I've ever had. And I know that sounds bad, but it's a positive actually. And I guess we can say the sunshine in this pandemic. Typically, it's extremely hard to really solve your teachers to go to a face-to-face training. But the synchronous and asynchronous virtual trainings provided for the co-op have been just a key component for our progress and growth plans for our staff. In fact, I think I've had every single teacher complete at least 2 of the module trainings through the Southeast South Central. And we'll continue to do that as these are created. Because again, it's hard for us, 1, for funding, but 2, to cover staffing for employees to leave the district for a day. So these modules have just been superb for my district, and I know some other districts that are using them. So kudos to the co-ops and KDE for assisting in getting these programs. Again, it's something we probably would have not, I mean, we were doing some of it, but I think this is definitely a way for the future for my teachers to be trained in concepts of IEP development, progress monitoring, and all the other essentials for the world of special education. So great job to the co-ops.
Thank you for that feedback. And as you said, we did do some of the modules in just small portions before the pandemic, and we kept talking about how we wanted to do more modules. And it just so happens that once the pandemic hit, we knew that we had to do it, and we just buckled down and we did those modules. And some of those we will be able to use for years and years, and some of them will have to be updated pretty regularly.
Yeah. Something I've loved to see is the collaboration across cooperatives to be able to come up with very professional quality trainings that all teachers can access.
So anytime you need training or that we can help any way, please just reach out to your special education cooperative.
Thank you both. And I would just add to what Barry said about these videos. I mean, I'm really impressed, and I'm interested in watching some of these myself, just as a parent working with kids at home. You know, I'm sure there's things that we could pick up and learn in working with the teachers at school and doing some of the work at home with our students as well. So what a great wealth of information that if there is a silver lining, I'm sure this accelerated the work you were already doing out of necessity. So thank you for all your work on that. Thank you.
And Stephanie and Brandy, I want to say thank you as well. We meet with the cooperative directors about once a month, and the directors have all been willing to present to the State Advisory Council, and it really makes it nice if when we have our regional meetings, if we can align regionally with the director in that area to really share and talk about the work that's happening. And we get to, build a relationship with those folks as well. And like Stephanie has mentioned, I feel like that relationship is really strong now. And keep in mind, they really are the training arm of our Office of Special Education and Early Learning. And so we have to be in tandem and in sync. And I've really enjoyed working with the director. So Stephanie and Brandy, I really appreciate you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Stephanie or Brandy? Okay, thank you very much. And I know the link to some of those educational videos in the KDE, the location of those resources on the KDE website was shared in the chat. And then Joe shared the entire presentation via email just before the meeting as well.
I have one thing. I know next on our agenda, we were going to hear a presentation about our Kentucky Academic Standards in World Language. I just wanted to let you know that Thomas and Aaron are doing the same presentation for our Teacher Advisory Council, which happened to be the same time as this meeting.
Oh,
so
okay.
I know that they will most likely be joining us closer to between 3 and 4. And it is a very good presentation too. I'm looking forward to you all hearing that and providing some feedback. But I think it might be best if you're able to talk about the council annual report and possibly the meeting calendar. And then when they join us, they can just jump in with their presentation if that's okay.
Sure, that would be great. Okay, and I think I saw Lisa Hutchison join us. Lisa, are you still with us?
I am. It's
Very good.
Everyone.
Well, I knew the next item on that we were going to discuss was the 2020 annual report. And as the past chair, Lisa was so kind to work very, very hard on putting this report together. It was very thorough and well written, and Joe posted it to the Google Drive for us. So hopefully everyone has had some time to review that. And I just kind of wanted to give you an opportunity to give us an overview if you would like to do that, Lisa.
Let's see.
Or if there's any comments that you wanted to make, did you want to?
Well, I'm not able to access it, but I don't know if you can pull it up to share, but basically I went through and explained kind of what we had done in this last year. And of course, I do think that COVID really kind of turned the world upside down, actually, toward the end. And I think more of our focus went toward responding to the needs at that point in non-traditional instruction. And so there were a few things that I think that we wanted to do that we didn't necessarily accomplish, and hopefully the council can continue to take
oh, there it is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, because that kind of guides me a little bit to have that in front of us. But certainly I just kind of did a summation of what we had done and what we had talked about and what the council, the work that we had that we did last year. Certainly if anybody has questions or concerns or changes, certainly I can go through and make any corrections or changes or addendums as we see necessary. Typically, the way our reports are structured is that we go through and we do an overview of what our job is, our duties are. We also go through the membership, and you'll see we started with a much larger number of members than where you guys are right now. And then we go through and talk about what we've done, a summary of the meeting locations and the meetings and what we discussed during those meetings, what the agenda items were, and then any actions that were taken from those meetings. And some of those things, a couple of things were deferred. I think that we had some questions regarding corporal punishment in our schools, and that kind of got during the session last year. That was something that was tabled due to the session, I think, the time running out. So that's something that this group may want to address with a new legislative session, is where we're looking at corporal punishment, in particular with students with disabilities, and wanting to write our letter in support of cessation of that, that action. And so that was something that might be that the group might want to consider this year. And then another thing that I think maybe the group may want to consider is that we talked a lot about preschool and preschool transition and preschool. We talked about that. We also talked about making sure that parents know how to access and the resources that are out there, and just coming up with a better way possibly of getting information to families, getting information to parents and caregivers. And so that was something that we did get a committee. We did form a committee to look at that and to actually think about things such as the access and the readability and of our website, of the department's website, the web information. As you can see, there have been so many resources that are out there for folks to access, but we're wondering if parents are actually accessing that, and how we can better get information to them so that they can be more involved in their children's educational programs. So those were some of the things that, I guess those were the highlights, I guess, if you will, of the report, and maybe the things that are to-dos that you guys may want to consider when you're prioritizing for this next year. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
Pretty good. Well, thank you. I know the communication committee, Ravon, Eric, Brandy, and myself, we communicated a bit before this meeting to try to do a better job of disseminating the information about the open forum, and both via social media and other avenues. And hopefully we'll see improved involvement on that. And then hopefully between this meeting and maybe the next meeting in February, the Family Involvement Committee can meet via email or virtual meeting and have some more discussion about that. So I appreciate you reminding us of those things. It's a little bit more difficult when we're meeting virtually to remember those things. Does anyone have any comments or questions, any changes or recommendations regarding the annual report?
Lisa, I just want to say thank you for putting that information together. I know Barry provided a good template for us for the years that he served as chair, and so that made it very easy for us to plug in the information. And so thank you for documenting that for us to make the transition smooth for Melissa, and then Melissa will do the same thing as we proceed. I do just encourage you to kind of revisit that information and go back and look for areas that you feel like that we really didn't hit very well, and we may need to continue for this as we set priorities for the next council. We will have new members that come in to join us, and I think this at least gives them a place to start One thing I've really enjoyed is just how knowledgeable that all of the members are on this council. And so I think that we have been able to become better organized. And so we have built some momentum that I think we can continue to pass forward to the next group. And so Lisa, I appreciate your leadership with that.
Thank you very much. And like we said, Barry made it easy, much easier with that template that he provided, and it has been a pleasure serving as chair and serving on the SACEC and SAPEC. I would say I've been with it for a little while, so I will certainly miss being able to be with everybody, but I know you'll continue the awesome work that you do and very valuable work that you do.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, I don't hear any further questions or comments. Does the council feel like we can approve this today, or would you like to have some more time to review the report?
Melissa, actually, Veronica Sullivan would like to share something.
Okay.
Go ahead, Veronica.
Sorry, I was muted. I apologize. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to comment on something that was mentioned in Lisa's report that she shared. After attending these sessions, we try to listen to the needs of the council as representatives of your area, and so we have created a parent resource page, which the council may not be aware of. I'll go ahead and put the link in the chat, but I just wanted to let you know we did organize a lot of information. This link that I'm sharing will get you to the beginning page, but there are a lot of links that go beyond that as well. So I just want to share that.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. That certainly makes the work of that committee much easier, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We will definitely check that out. And that may be something we want to, add a comment about in the annual report. What are the thoughts of the council members?
I think it's a good idea.
I would just ask, this is Lisa Hutchison. I was just going to ask when that was added, was that during this year, during the time that we were, as far as including in the report, it may have been something that was being developed as we were meeting, or it could have been something that was completed afterwards. I'm not sure, Veronica. I thought I remembered you're saying that maybe you guys were working on it during that year. So,
Yes, Lisa, that's correct. We started working on it approximately, I would say around 7 months ago. So it would have been within the year. And again, it was, in response to the comments from this council, as well as the needs of parents during COVID, to really have some clear communication and a place to go to get information.
Very good. If there are no other additions or corrections, I would accept a motion to accept the report with the addition of the comments about the parent resource page being established.
Barry Lee, I'll make that motion.
Barry? Thank you, Barry. Can I get a second?
This is Eric Umstead. I'll second it.
Thank you, Eric. All right, and we'll take a roll call vote for that as well. Melissa Knight, I vote yes. Anita Dowd. Is she still on?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thanks, Anita.
Yes.
Okay. Julie Rubemeyer.
Yes.
Thank you. Anna Light.
Yes.
Eric Umstead.
Yes.
Thank you. Ravon Sims.
Yes.
Thank you. Greta. I don't know if she would vote or abstain.
Yeah, I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Okay, Barry Lee.
Yes.
I think that's everyone.
And Melissa, Thomas, and Aaron are with us now, just letting you know.
Great, thank you. All right, out of respect for their time, if it's okay for everyone, we'll circle back to that item on the agenda. So Thomas Klaus with the Education Academic Program Manager and Aaron Chavez, the Academic Program Consultant out of the Division of Program Standards are joining us to discuss Kentucky Academic Standards for World Languages. So thank you very much, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Melissa. And I'm Krista Hall, and I decided to join the party too with them to present. First of all, thank you very much for squeezing us in. I apologize. We were on another advisory and trying to make all the times work. So what we wanted to share with you all today is we do have a new regulation that went before the board last week. We just want to make sure that you all are aware that this has occurred. So this is a new regulation for the Kentucky Academic Standards for World Language. And currently there have not been any academic standards for world language in Kentucky law. So with this new regulation, what it will establish is that any public school that offers a world language course or a program would use these standards to meet the minimum requirements. And so we had a couple guiding questions, and if you just want to think about these as we're going through the presentation, and at the end, if you have feedback for us, or if you even want to send the feedback to your representative, and then they can share this with us. So really, the two questions are, one, do you agree with the key points of the writer's vision statement? And then also, should these key points be equally weighted, or should specific points be more emphasized? And you'll see as we go through and we look at those key points that really this will come down to if your agreement or the philosophy of this with educators will impact their implementation in the classrooms. And so a little background on the standards revision process. This is very technical and I'll go quickly with it, but there are 6 requirements when we are revising standards to make sure that are considered. First is that we focus on the critical knowledge and skills, that the standards result in fewer standards but more in depth, that the standards are communicated, the expectations are clear and concise to all party holders, as well as that it is based on evidence-based research, international benchmarks are considered, and that there is alignment and progressions from elementary to high school to post-secondary to assist in the successfulness for students at each level. This next slide, we like to call this our game board, and you can see there's quite a lot of steps when you're at the very beginning. It can be a little bit intimidating. As I mentioned, this, or I believe I mentioned, this went before the Kentucky Board of Education last week, and so that puts us in the 3rd column at the 3rd box down. So we're pretty close to the end, and then these standards will be approved into law. And so this is the process that we follow for all of our content area standards, regardless of what subject it is. So at this time, I do want to turn it over to Thomas, and he'll give you a little more details about the specific document.
Thank you, Krista. And so this process began last fall with an independent survey sent out to collect information on the kind of guideline document that had been guidance around world language instruction in the state. We convened teacher writers, both AP and RC committees, together starting in the winter, and they have been working since then on producing the draft Kentucky Academic Standards for World Language. As Krista alluded to at the beginning, what led this kind of work was the writer's vision statement. So they came together and kind of laid out what they envisioned this document to be. So high level overview of this is they really wanted to ensure that students had opportunities to practice not only language, but also cultural knowledge. They wanted to also ensure that students aren't just learning about speaking the language, but learning about the people, practices, and places who are part of that language culture. They want to ensure that students are deep thinkers. They're inquiring, they're curious, and they're reflecting on the language that they're learning. And really, the teacher writers, really their main focus was pushing culture to the center of language learning. They wanted to ensure that students realize that language is something that is living. And so the way that French is spoken in Paris varies greatly than the way that French is spoken in Haiti or Port-au-Prince. And so understanding the way that the language and culture interact was a big point for the writers. Within the document, the writers really wanted to ensure that their progression that looked at kind of language proficiency from novice to advanced was tied to national standards. They wanted to ensure that students weren't only practicing verbal language, but also nonverbal skills. And they, again, wanted to push the focus of language learning on culture. They also wanted to provide examples of what instruction may look like, not an exhaustive list, but what it could look like by looking at connections, comparisons, and communities. And they wanted to ensure that this aligned also to American Sign Language standards. I'll turn it over now to my colleague, Aaron Chavez, who will talk a little bit about the architecture of the standards.
Thank you, Thomas. Okay, so this is tiny font, so you probably can't see it very well, but this is actually what the writers drafted for the Kentucky Academic Standards for World Language. And so you can see there's goal areas, there's standards. They built in guiding questions for the teachers and the students to think about how they're going to reach those proficiency benchmarks in the modes of communication. They also wanted to make sure that the benchmarks were there, so novice, intermediate, and advanced, and those are subdivided with performance indicators. And then another piece of the architecture that they wanted to include were sample learning targets. The sample learning targets are not an exhaustive list, but just for teachers to brainstorm and to build off from. And then the next page, it's again another picture of what the Kentucky Academic Standards for World Language looks like. And actually the intercultural communication, the writers wanted to move up front because they really wanted to put the emphasis back on culture and how culture and communication work together. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Aaron. And so in September, an independent third party put out a survey around the draft Kentucky Academic Standards for World Language. And as you can imagine, that survey most respondents to that survey were world language teachers, but we also got a smattering of other educational stakeholders. One of the big takeaways from this was of the respondents, 74% accepted the draft Kentucky Academic Standards for World Language as is, while 26% of other respondents had additional feedback. So our teacher writers were brought back in October to respond to those comments. And from that, they streamlined and simplified the document. As Aaron stated, they moved the intercultural communication standards to the forefront of the document to ensure that culture is at the center of language learning, one of their writer's vision statement points. And they also reviewed and revised the investigation and interaction standards from the intercultural communications to provide more of a framework for how teachers could think about building instruction from those standards. Here's a list of advisory groups and focus groups we conducted in order to elicit additional feedback in the process. And this includes a focus group we did with World Language high school students in Fayette County, as well as the Kentucky World Language Association. Going back to the writer's vision statement, I did want to pause and create space if you do have any feedback at this moment on whether or not you agree with these statements, and if you think some should be more weighted than others as we start to think about implementation. I want to pause and see if anybody had any comments on that. And feel free if you do to unmute and say, and if not, I'll also open the floor to getting feedback on the guiding questions, or if there are just any questions in general that you all have about the process. Thank you all.
So Melissa and Joe, we definitely appreciate the time today. And so if you have any members that do forward you any concerns or clarifications or questions, please send them our way and we'd be more than happy to expand.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Krista, Thomas, and Aaron. And I know you had to double up today with 2 advisory groups. And so really appreciate that presentation. It just really goes to show how in-depth our process really is and how important it is. And so this group is looking for your feedback. And if you do have concerns or areas that you want to promote, please let us know and we'll pass that along to the team. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And we appreciate you all squeezing us in and adapting your agenda. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you. All right. Does anyone have any other comments or questions? Okay. One thing we wanted to address while we have the group is the upcoming meeting dates. And I believe that this set of dates was also uploaded to the Google Drive. Is that correct, Joe?
Yeah, and I can pull it up right here. One thing I want everyone to think about, of course, we will try to continue to coordinate with the ARC of Kentucky conference in February and the CEC conference in November, but we just wanted to get some virtual meetings set on the calendar just in case, you know, they didn't meet. And so we kind of put an asterisk by that as well. Okay. But I'll share my screen so I can pull that up for you.
So these are the 2021 proposed meeting dates. And right now they're tentatively listed as virtual through Microsoft Teams, but hopefully maybe some of these might be able to be in person. I'm trying to be very positive.
Yeah, and what we tried to do is coordinate a proposed 2021 virtual meeting that is close to when we met in 2020. And of course, we just have the 3-hour meeting and we would do the open forum at 4 o'clock. But we have them on Thursdays, except for November is a Tuesday. It's still that week before Thanksgiving. And so we were just going to propose these as a start, but we want you all to provide feedback. And if you need for us to adjust or change any of those, we can do that right now.
Does anyone have any comments about these proposed meeting dates? Days that may or may not work for one reason or another?
Another thing I would like to mention also is if we are able to meet face-to-face again and things are safer, then we will try to go back to a regional-based model where we are meeting, you know, at different locations equitably throughout the state. We'll try to align at state parks and try to move that around to where people don't have to, you know, take turns traveling and so forth. So this is just a virtual start to get on the calendar. And then hopefully we're able to possibly meet. I know February will be tough, but I do hope the November CEC conference might be on. That one might be more doable. So that's the best we can do.
This is Ravon. I think right now, preliminarily, I think these dates are as good as any. And then if we have the opportunity to meet face to face, I think that's great. And we can take a step back and regroup and plan some better dates if we need to.
Thank you, Ravon. Does anyone else have any feedback about those dates, or do they seem like they work? Any changes we need to make or comments? If not, we'll kind of move forward just tentatively putting those on the calendar. Joe, it sounds like, kind of like Ravon said, they're as good as anything right now.
Yep, sounds good. And I placed those dates in the chat for your reference as well. And of course, I will send out calendar meeting invites to get those on your calendar. And then I'll work with Melissa and others to try to coordinate with any conferences that we might be able to have, because I know all of you are in support of connecting with the ARC of Kentucky and our Kentucky CEC conference. So we'll just do the best we can on that one.
And, you know, one comment I would make, if you, you know, read through the annual report, or actually it might not have even been in there, I'm not sure, but we have an executive committee, but we are missing 2 at-large members that we need to put on that committee. And we're holding off until February, where we'll hopefully have a more complete council and have more members, and then we'll fill those roles at that time.
Melissa, the only other thing we have really before we adjourn is to do our exit slip, and so I do have a link for that I will put in the chat. And this, just keep in mind, it is very valuable for us to have your feedback because it helps us prepare for the next meeting, and we really get to review whether or not we met our objectives, what you were seeking. And so please take some time to complete that exit slip for us. That would be very helpful. I will email that out to you as well, but it's in the chat. So I'll turn it back over to you, Melissa.
All right. Well, I think that's all that we have on our meeting agenda, unless if you or Greta had any other comments that you wanted to make. If not, then we will adjourn until just before 4 o'clock, where we will get back together for the open forum session. And that's using the same meeting link, correct?
Yep, and we can take a break and then come back at 4, and I will jump on here about 15 minutes prior just to help control traffic a little bit. And then at 4, Melissa will read the opening statement, and then hopefully we have some folks who are able to speak. I know we did this before with the media portal and nobody was able to speak, and so now we've shared this link and they should be able to. Becca wants to speak to remind us about something too. Go ahead, Becca.
Okay. Well, I had a question. Should I end the recording of this meeting now and record the open forum separately, or does the open forum need to be recorded? Like, what next step should I have?
Let's see. I think you can stop recording and then we'll record again.
Okay.
And then when we post that, we'll just have to be certain that we post both links.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for doing that. All right. If there's no other business or no other questions, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Barry or Eric?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Eric.
That's Eric.
Can I get a second?
I can second that.
Hey. Ravon?
From Ravon.
A second from Ravon. Thank you. All right, and we'll do a roll call vote on that as well, I'm sure. So Melissa, yes. Anita Dowd. Julie Rubenmeyer.
Yes.
Anna Light.
Yes.
Eric Umstead.
Yes.
And Greta.
Yes, I can vote on that.
I wanted to give you the chance. Ravon?
Yes.
Barry?
Anita said yes.
Anita said yes, thank you. And Barry may have had to jump off, I don't know. Okay, I think that's everybody. Thank you all very much. And so we'll drop off and we will rejoin a little bit before 4.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, Joe.